Council Chambers on this kind of feels like winter, Monday, October 28th. But we know it's not quite winter yet, and hopefully that it goes away and we get some sunshine before the real winter hits. Okay, members of council, we have two meetings tonight. The first one is a very fast and quick one, which is the organization meeting. If I can have a motion, please, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I make a motion that we accept the October 28th, 2019 Organizational Council meeting agenda as presented.
Thank you. Administration, anything to add? Okay. With that, call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Moving on to the first item is 3.1, the appointment of Deputy Mayor. And I believe everybody's read the background. We do this every 4 months, and this time around it is Councillor Plechko will be the next Deputy Mayor. So with that, Councillor Meyer, thank you for your work last 4 months. I appreciate you covering some of the meetings that I was able not to attend, and you did very well on those, so thank you. Councillor Plechko, join me down.
Remember, when Stephanie takes her pictures, you're like,
You must be getting into trouble all the time too, because you're sitting right here.
you and I.
That's my ability. Execute according to law. Execute according to law. No, Deputy Mayor. Councilman Plate and Councilman All right, so thank you, Councilor Plechko, for that. Now I need a motion, and that's why I did it after, because you can't say no to it after. So, Councilor Loy, please. Councilor Loy?
Lori, Your Worship.
Sorry, I have a little cold. Councilor Loy?
The Town Council appoint Councillor Harold Plechko as Deputy Chief Elected Official for the term of October 28, 2019 to February 29, 2020, or until the appointment of the next Deputy Chief Elected Official. Deputy Chief Elected Official be given the title of Deputy Mayor.
Okay. So again, thank you, Councilor Meyer, for your service, and thank you, Councilor Plechko, because there'll be a lot more meetings that you'll be attending on my behalf. Great. With that, I call the question. All in favor? You have to vote, sir. Can I call that again? All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Unless you oppose yourself. You can be opposed to yourself being Deputy Mayor. But. Okay, moving on to item number 4 is council meeting schedule. As you can see, there is a schedule that is laid out by administration for November of 2019, all the way to our next org meeting, which is October 26th of 2020. Did anybody see any dates that are in error? It's on a Sunday or Saturday. All the Wednesdays look good? Yes.
Start at 1 now, right?
Yes, so everything that's a Tuesday is because there's a holiday on a Monday, so therefore we'll move on to a Tuesday. Okay, any questions regarding that? Go ahead, Councilor Lowry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question in regards to a paragraph in the background, seeking council's feedback to have the 2020 corporate plan meetings begin at 4:30. And then it goes to say we will, this will be brought for decision at the 2020 organizational meeting. We're debating the 2020 corporate plan at the beginning of this November, and so I'm wondering which one of those years is incorrect, whether it's the 2021 corporate plan meetings begin at 4:30 and decided at the 2020 organizational meeting, or if it is in fact the 2020 corporate plan and that's being decided here at the 2019.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Laurie, apologize for the confusion. It's referring to the fiscal year, I guess, both 2020. So this would be for the organizational meeting next year in 2020 and it would be the debate of the 2021 corporate plan.
Okay, so it's just an error in the background. Thank you, Councillor Laurie.
So just for clarification, then November 4th, 5th, 6th, 2019, 2020 corporate plan, those will remain at 6 p.m.
That is correct.
Any other questions regarding the dates and times? Okay. See none? And I need a motion there. Councillor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the Town Council approve the 2019-2020 council meeting schedule as presented. The location will be the Town Office Council Chambers at 4905 51st Avenue, Stony Plain, Alberta. All governance and priority and regular council meetings will begin at 6 p.m.
Okay, sounds good. Any questions, comments? Okay. See none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. And moving on to number 5, council appointments. Councillor Mandies, please.
The town council appoint members of council to agencies, boards, and committees is presented, and request administration to send a letter to each agency, board, and committee confirming the appointments.
Okay. Members of council, have you had a chance to look through the appointments? Anything that is an oversight that if 2 commissions are in the same day that I've put somebody on there that conflicts, please let me know so that we can change it right now. Okay. Don't see none. Councilor Mandies, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Move on to 5.2. It's an appointment of chair of the MPC. Councillor Bennett, please.
I move the Town Council appoint Councillor Justin Laurie as chairperson of the Municipal Planning Commission as established through bylaw 2499/D&P/13.
Okay, thank you very much. Members of administration, anything to comment? Nope. Okay, members of council, anything to comment or question? Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, moving on to item 6 is the 2020 Citizens at Large appointments. And Deputy Mayor, please.
The Town Council approve and appoint the following individuals to fill the various citizen-at-large vacancies on the council-appointed boards and committees as presented.
Okay. So these names have been recommended by these committees. They've done their interview process to council. Does council have any concerns about any name that's on there that might not have been raised before? Okay. See none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. And that is carried. Thank you. And with that, it goes to number 7, which is adjournment. That finishes our organization council meeting. So council, that is the fastest meeting we'll ever have. Great. Okay, moving on to our regular council meeting for October 28th. And there's an agenda before you. If I can have my deputy mayor make the motion, please.
That council accept the agenda for Monday, October 28th, 2019 at 6 p.m.
Okay, thank you. Administration, anything to add to the agenda? Okay. See none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. That is carried. Move on to public input session. This is the time that we allow members of our public to address council on anything that's not on the current agenda. Is there somebody that is in the audience like to talk to council about something? You? Good. Welcome. Come on. Sure. Just one at a time, or both of you guys will all come at the same time. There is a sign-up sheet right there. So if you can go ahead and sign your sheet, and then just introduce yourselves to the member of council.
Benjamin Boher.
Benjamin.
Or do we refer to you as your worship as well?
Yes, you can. Thank you.
Trevor Johnson, Stony Plain resident, 35 Willow Way.
Do you want a chair? Like we can have another chair brought up for you guys. Thank you for taking this opportunity and coming to public input session to share your thoughts. And you can go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, I guess I can start. Again, our address is in Willow Park, 35 Willow Way. And this morning, actually over the last little bit, we have a park, we back onto a park reserve.
It's the Willow Park natural area.
And there was a stockpile of black dirt that was there for years. We moved in 2013, and it's been there. Used as a toboggan hill for the kids, and the stockpilers are moved a little bit last year and completely removed this year and flattened out. Then this morning there was a forest or a tree area which was cut down with a chainsaw, completely removed all the trees out of the natural park reserve right behind our houses. Is one of the reasons that I think we purchased the house and the lot, and we feel that the decision to do so doesn't really make sense and decrease the property value as well as the enjoyment of backing into a park reserve. And there's at least 20 plus to 30 full mature poplar trees, as well as an entire willow grove within the area. So it's not 5 or 6 trees, it's a significant amount. I didn't have enough time to find the pictures of the in full green, but we do have pictures of the chainsaw carnage that was.
The decision to do this, I think, was done, and the action of cutting down these trees was done without us having the opportunity to oppose it in council. So now we have to show up after the fact to a clear-cut field instead of a natural area.
We only had about 30 minutes to prepare to come here, so I have many pictures of what it used to look like on my DSLR camera, but I couldn't get them for today. But they took video of all the trees just laying on the ground behind. And we have another neighbor we were able to tell, and he didn't know yet either. He was just getting his kids off to hockey, but he wanted me to say that he was upset with that as well. And been out of town for a couple days, but you were saying that you were hearing an owl.
Yeah, it's not.
Oh yeah, we were getting lots of wildlife. Owls were hunting in that area at night, and you get to hear it and experience it being a little part of nature, even in Stony Plain. And now it's a clear-cut field. But I think we don't just come to complain. We'd like to come with a solution that mature trees get planted in that same area to make it more, or keep it more like the nature reserve that it should be.
Okay, so there was a motion from council to do a report on the Willow Park natural area, and that came to council a couple weeks ago of what the changes could be, and council supported that change, and therefore were implemented. So if I can have administration give you guys that link or the package so that you can read through what's all going on there and what's happening. So I think one of the changes was to have more of a kind of a park-like setting instead of a natural area, because there's nothing natural about there because we created the little creek behind for drainage and everything else. So it's just getting to get more access and more accessibility for the rest of our residents in our community.
I am familiar with that, and it did discuss removing that hill, but I believe those trees were supposed to remain intact.
So again, it wasn't taking up the entire area.
Yeah.
It was a grove of trees in the middle that was along the park. There's walkway area between the house property line and the grove of trees, and there was a significant area and a walkway on the other side all around the area. So it was just a grove of trees in the middle, making it actually nature and enjoyable. That can be turned into a park-like area around the trees. There's several other walking paths and areas that are all fully different patches of trees in nature. And really what it did is it took away all of the blocking from the roadway, the noise barrier, the nature barrier, and now it's just it's a barren field straight out to the road.
Yeah, and those trees framed the field. They didn't obstruct the field, right?
But I would appreciate seeing what that.
Okay, so when we're finished here, we'll get the manager of planning and infrastructure connect with you, and then we'll get you the plans, and then the report that was tabled to council.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can give a little bit of an explanation as to what happened here. So, administration did go in there, and the initial intention was to clear out some of the willows in the area and leave the poplars standing, and then have them there, supplement them with some additional other trees next year in the future. However, whenever we exposed the area and looked at the health of those trees, the roots were damaged and exposed, and they were deemed a hazard by our arborists. So that's why they had to come down, because they would have fallen down, in his opinion anyway, if not now, but sometime in the near future. So we didn't want them falling on the fences or on any of the property or on anybody walking through the area. So they were deemed a liability at that time, so that's why they came down. So the intention is still to replant something in that area, again, going into the future.
Your Worship, if I can just add one more thing to that. I've got 30 years experience in the industrial and commercial construction, as well as we owned a family commercial construction and landscaping company. So I've done this since the time I was about 16 years old, in both residential, parkland, and working in municipalities. There was some dirt work done and to smooth out from where the hill was, and there were a couple roots that were exposed, but the majority of that grove hadn't been touched. And looking at all the roots right now, I took pictures of all those. There was no dead rot in any of the black or in any of the poplar trees whatsoever. There's a couple of dead willows in the area, but in the grove of 20 to 30 trees, there was maybe one or two that had exposure on roots, and it's surface roots, not the entire tree. So although I can respect when you do a landscaping and you level it off, that may be some damage and maybe take one or two trees out, but it doesn't justify the taking out every tree. And I appreciate the fact that you have a plan and you're looking at something like that. We just wanted to let you know that it is an importance and a priority to the people that live in the area, that it is that it made it significantly more enjoyable and more for both personal and for property value, and appreciate it if it can go back to something it is and not just sapling trees, but something that can actually make it and restore it back to there. It's unfortunate, I don't know what the instructions were, but to clear cut the whole area for a few trees that were exposed wouldn't be what we would do. And I've done a significant amount of work in the River Valley in Edmonton, working with the City of Edmonton and Parks and Rec.
Okay. So thank you for coming to public input session. The general manager will connect with you to share the report, and then you guys can go through that, and we'll again look at a way to kind of make it a little bit better than what it is right now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else in council chambers like to speak to council on anything that's not on the current agenda? Okay, see none, we'll move on to presentations and delegations. And today we have one presentation, and that is to our Stony Plain Legion 256 branch. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Madam President. They should be on. You just have to speak directly into the mics.
Okay. Good evening, Your Worship, town councillors, staff, and guests. My name is Pat Hale. I'm the president of the Stony Plain Legion here in town. And today I'm accompanied by Comrade Andrew Bankovich, who is our Poppy chairman, and Conrad Buck Hoots, who is our second vice president. The Poppy campaign is the largest fundraising event in the support of veterans that is run by the Royal Canadian Legion across Canada. The campaign this year started this past Friday and runs to and including Monday, November 11th. Funds are raised mainly to support serving and ex-service members in need, and to fund medical appliances and research, home services, care facilities, and numerous other purposes that benefit veterans. Each year, over 21 million Canadians wear poppies, and the Poppy campaign raises over 17 million for veterans and their families. Last year, the Poppy campaign in Stony Plain brought in approximately $34,000, of which $14,600 went directly to benefits to veterans. 4,000 to cadets, 4,000 to veteran organizations, and 8,200 to student bursaries and other organizations such as Light Up Your Life. This year, on Friday, October 25th, Branch 256 Stony Plain of the Royal Canadian Legion's annual poppy campaign started with poppies being distributed by our members to businesses, schools, and care centers throughout Stony Plain and the County of Parkland. Members and cadets will also be distributing poppies at some of our local designated businesses. They will attend services at Parkland School Division schools and also at care centers in Stony Plain. We would like to at this time present you with a poppy and all those here.
Thank you very much. Members of council, if you can sit down. And before the three of you take off, I just want on behalf of council and our residents, thank you very much for the work that you do in our communities and the service that you have provided for all residents of Alberta and Canada. There's a lot of sacrifices that have been given by our members of our servicemen and women, a lot of them that we don't see and don't understand, but we know we're here and we're able to have free and open meetings and able to have freedom of speech and the rights that we do have because of the sacrifices that you made for us. So thank you very much on that. Okay, moving on, there is no statutory public hearings. Moving on to council adoption of minutes, the RCM of October 16th. Councillor Bennett, please. Councillor Bennett.
Oh, thank you. I move the town council approve the town council meeting minutes as presented.
Okay. Members of council, any errors or omissions or comments on those minutes that you have read? Okay. See none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, moving on to council boards, commissions, committee minutes. And we're going to do all 6, so 7.1 all the way to 7.6. And Councillor Matties, please.
The town council received the council boards, commission, and committee minutes for information.
Okay. Thank you. Members of council, any questions or comments regarding the minutes that have been posted? I have one question to the representative that sits on the Stony Plain FCSS board. Let me just find that. There was mention in that report that a motion was defeated to write a letter of support to join, to support the poverty reduction strategy. Can you provide some little information on that? I think FCS was doing a poverty reduction strategy with the tri-region, and I was curious that a motion to support that was defeated.
Absolutely, they are 100% in support of poverty reduction. What this was it was a letter by a few of the FCSS boards that basically was providing a list of what the past government had supported, and that they were asking for the current government that was just elected, not the first that just elected, but that proposed to be elected. They wanted them to know what services they expected to continue, and this board felt that that was not what they were intending to ask for. They wanted to share with the government what good things that FCSS is doing in our communities, and so our representative, our director, met with our MLAs and spoke with them about what we're doing in our region.
Thank you for that. That sets my mind at ease a little bit. Okay. Any other questions and concerns regarding? Okay. See none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried. Moving on to item 8, bylaws. This is the 2619 LIC 19. This is the business license update. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship, and to all of council for the opportunity to speak this evening. With cannabis having been legal in Canada for the past year, council requested a review of all relative legislation by the end of 2019. After a year of implementation, administration has contacted surrounding municipalities to determine the impacts of cannabis and the town bylaw. In regards to fees, St. Albert and Edmonton were the only other municipalities that implemented additional fees for cannabis retail businesses. A list of the municipalities contacted have been provided for your reference in the lead sheet. As the town's business license fee also applies to production facilities, the town has been unable to attract new business of this type. Several qualified leads have come to the attention of the economic development team through direct contact, as well as in conjunction with Edmonton Global, all with the intention of constructing new production facilities, but ultimately did not choose to develop in Stony Plain. To date, 3 retail cannabis businesses have received business licenses, with the total fees collected being just over $9,000. After a year of reflection, administration recommends that all definitions and references to cannabis within the business license bylaw, as well as the cannabis fees in Schedule A, be removed and cannabis businesses be regulated the same as any commercial or industrial business in the bylaw. Administration has provided the proposed updated bylaw with highlighted changes and included it in the attachments for council's reference. I'd be happy to take questions at this time.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Laurie, motion please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the council gives first reading to bylaw 2619 LIC 19, a bylaw provided for the licensing, control, and regulating of any business or industry within the town of Stony Plain.
Okay. Members of council, any questions of clarity and understanding before we go to debate? Councilor Bennett.
My question is, does this bylaw or this bylaw need to go to a public hearing?
No. I don't believe so.
Your Worship, no, it does not require a public hearing.
Then could I ask, what is the rationale for not doing all 3 readings in one night?
To give an opportunity.
Your Worship, just for clarification, we wanted to bring first reading in front of you so that if there were questions, we know that cannabis has been a fairly large topic, so to speak, in Canada through the past year. So, first reading in front of you tonight. We're asking for that at this point in time. If there's any follow-up or clarification, so on and so forth, we would be able to bring that back for second and third reading.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Bennett, if I could also add that we are compiling all of the fees and charges into one bylaw, which you'll see at the end of November come back to you. And so to align up all the bylaws, the fees and charges schedule A in this will be repealed and put in the fees and charges bylaw. So we need to do that all at the same time. So in November, you'll see a new fees and charges bylaw with all of these compiled in there. And that was part of the timing thing as well, that all of this will come back and the second and third at the same time as that new bylaw.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Councillor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two questions. The first to administration. Part of the original discussion around the different fees was the community's responsibility for the additional potential of enforcement, so on and so forth, that would be required based on the cannabis business. Can you tell us, for the first year, now that we've had 1 year under our belt, have we incurred any additional charges or any additional costs in respect to enforcement of our bylaws that we would attribute to the revenues gained by these additional fees?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Laurie, no, it's been business as usual. So Cannabis has not created any additional tasks or any additional workload for our CPO staff.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And the second question, Your Worship, around the same time last year, the business license bylaw had actually been brought back to Council proposing an increase, which at that time Council did not approve. In that time frame, I'm wondering if these fees and charges have been reconsidered on a whole, not just from the cannabis standpoint, and if administration will be bringing forward a new business license structure anytime in the near future.
Your Worship, to Councillor Laurie, at this point we've been focusing just around the cannabis just because of it being 1 year after implementation, so that was our focus. But of course, directed, we could bring that back.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Laurie?
Yes, Your Worship. Am I on? Yeah, yes, Your Worship. And appreciate this being brought back. We said in 1 year we would take another look at our bylaw and stuff like that. And I do support this. There may be some people still in our community. This could be a contentious issue. And I'm hoping that our media people and other venues can advertise to the people that this is what that council is going to do. So some don't feel that this is a bit of a shock.
Good. Councillor Matthews?
Thank you, Your Worship. To administration, just a couple of questions. First of all, with regards to the specific businesses that are noted in here, for example, Boxer, Carnival, I'm wondering, like, how long have these businesses been separated out in this bylaw? Is this something that's like many, many years old and that we should be considering? Because as I've looked at other communities, I don't see those types of businesses listed and separated in terms of additional fees. So that's question number one. Then question number two, I also noticed as I looked at, for example, other communities that we compare ourselves with, for example, Cochrane or City of Chestermere, City of Camrose, their fees are all, like, in terms of the base fee, we're charging $100 for a resident and $200 for a non-resident. They seem to be more along the $150 mark and the $300 mark. If we didn't have those additional other fees that we're talking about cannabis, would you say that the fee that we're charging right now is be suitable?
Sure. Your Worship, to Councillor Matties, to be honest, a lot of the focus has been around cannabis of recent, just preparing to bring this back in. But of course, when reaching out to surrounding municipalities, we do get information on business license fees in general. Our fees are pretty much in line when it comes to that. On average, I would say there's the odd anomaly here and there where it might be a one-time fee or maybe a one-time fee then 50% the following years, etc. But for the most part, we are pretty much in line with most of the surrounding municipalities.
And then with regards to the specific businesses?
Oh, sorry, Your Worship, to Councillor Matties. Sorry, on the special, just so I have clarification on the special services.
Well, yeah, basically the specifically named businesses that are listed in here.
Sure. Your worship, to Councillor Matties, I would not be comfortable answering that one at the moment. I would prefer to do more research and follow up on those specifically, but of course it's something I'd be happy to bring back.
Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thank you, worship. You refer to anomaly. When I look at this, I don't see that. Maybe you can highlight that a little bit for me. Spruce Grove charges $260 and for non-residents $425. But my understanding is that it's a one-time fee, and if they renew within the 1 year, there is no additional costs. I also see Parkland County, which is our direct neighbor, and they do not have a fee for residents or non-residents. I'm just curious as to how you feel that we would be an anomaly towards our direct competitors within our region.
Sure. Your worship, to Councillor Plechko, I guess I was more referring to a fee structure, not so much the specific fees within it. If I was to dig deeper into it, you're correct. I mean, most of the counties, for instance, don't charge a fee at all. I believe Spruce Grove charges a $260 if I was to around, yeah, $260. I think if you stay current, I think it's only 50% of that fee going forward, if not just a one-time. Sorry, they're a one-time. I think I was thinking of Devon. I think Devon is the one where it's a 50%. So yeah, I guess digging deep into them, yeah, there would definitely be differences. I guess I was speaking more to we aren't there. Yeah, most of them besides the counties are charging a fee. I'd have to do more research onto the specifics within it after that, in regards to retail fees or the business license fees. But yeah, like I said, most of my research has been around cannabis-related items to here, but I'd be happy to dig more information up on that.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? I have a question. Are we having problems attracting retail businesses that sell cannabis in our community?
Your worship, I would say on the retail side of things, not so much. We have, I want to say, 9 permits at the moment. We have 3 operating, which is a pretty, I guess, a fair number at the moment, especially with it only being a year in. So I would say on the retail side of things, no.
Okay, so with that being asked and answered, then how are we compared to the other municipalities that you showed us? How many applications do they have open and how many retail stores do they actually have active?
I don't have that, oh, sorry, your worship. I don't have that broken down in the chart, but off the top of my head, I have a few in mind, but I would prefer to probably have that more concrete and brought back to you.
Okay. I understand bringing this back forward and asking to be removed if there's an issue of getting businesses into our community of that nature. And you just acknowledge that it's not hindering the retail side. So could we do something not on the retail side, but on the production side? Like, do we have to change it all, or can we just leave the retail side as is and change the production side?
Your worship, if I may, I believe that, the recommendation in front of council is administration's perspective that, moving forward, we would see this as a net benefit to have the fees set as presented. Should council see fit to make alterations, ultimately that would be up to council.
Councilor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship. With respect to the comments that you've just made, I think we've recognized, obviously, from the production side that this has impacted us, but I think the key is when we debated these, we weren't sure what we were receiving from cannabis revenue from the provincial government. As it laid down, we also weren't sure what our enforcement services would look like in respect to this. I think we've heard tonight that we've had no issues with the retail licenses. We have had issues with the growth operations, with attracting those type of businesses, and we've had no issues with our enforcement. I don't see why we would continue to segregate these businesses out into a different vertical when the justification we originally put forth no longer exists. I think, it was an unknown at the time, and we had to make a very tough decision, and I still stand by the decision that we made then. But now that we're 1 year into this and we have seen how cannabis has rolled out and we have seen what's coming, I believe there's great opportunities to attract businesses now that the edible framework has been approved and is legalized. And I think it would be a shame for us to miss out on any more potential economic development opportunities by continuing to put in an unjust licensing fee structure that no other community around us seems to have.
Councillor Bennett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do you know, administration, if Edmonton or St. Albert are thinking of eliminating these extra charges?
Your Worship, to Councillor Bennett, no, at this moment they are not. They have reflected on their fees over the past year as well, and they'll be sticking with the fees that they have currently.
Interesting.
Okay. So then I'm going to ask another question here, because this doesn't sit really well with me right now, because I understand reducing and getting rid of it if we have an issue. So I look at under page 59 where it says special services. And I think Councillor Matty's brought this up regarding these other things that we have that are segregated from our business license. How many auto wreckers or salvage yards do we have in our community?
Your Worship, I'm uncertain of that number at the moment. I'm sorry.
Okay. How many boxing or wrestling promoters do we have in our community?
Your Worship, those are typically more of a one-off event. So, I mean, not since I've started, I don't think we've had anyone apply for that, to my knowledge.
I'll ask again then. How many escort or dating services or massage parlors do we have in our community?
Your Worship, I'm uncertain of that number.
Okay. So in terms of being more open for business and you wanted to change this, we have a cannabis retail license fee at $1,000 plus $150 per square foot. That has not hampered retail stores coming to your community. But we have special services for these other ones that are listed here that you can't even tell me if we have any of these in our community. So if we want to broaden our economic diversity and stuff, wouldn't it be better to remove those fees from those services that we don't have in the community than those ones that we have in the community that have no problems getting in?
Your Worship, that's a fair comment. Just reflecting back, it's not something that I dove into. I was focusing more just around cannabis, but it's a fair question. So it's something I'd be happy to look at the numbers on and to see if maybe those shouldn't be segregated as well.
Councillor Matthews?
Your Worship, just a general comment. I do support Councillor Laurie's comments with regards to having a consistent, fair, competitive environment for our business community. And so I would like to see that we would not be separating a business like Cannabis, and I would like to see that they would be paying the same rate that other businesses would in our community. The businesses, I think, that ended up having to pay that fee. And if you're looking at, say, for example, the average of 1,000 square feet times that cost versus a production facility, it's still a lot of money relative to any business coming to this community, but they paid it probably because they had to. So I'm very, very supportive of bringing this in line with the other businesses in our community, no different than alcohol, etc. We've heard from our administration with regards to that. I would like to see these others that are separated out basically also be taken off and having, again, a consistently applied bylaw.
And then I have one more question regarding this. The Alberta government just released their budget a couple days ago, and AUMA, which we belong to, provided commentary on that. And one of the advocacy points that are in there is continuing to get the fair percentage to municipalities for the excise tax on cannabis. When cannabis was legalized, the federal government gave 75% of the fees to the provinces, and with that, they were supposed to funnel that money down to municipalities. I think we've gotten a very, very small percentage of that. This was supposed to help us recoup some of the costs that we were not getting. So if it's still an advocacy for the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association that we still need revenue from cannabis excise tax, then why are we removing it from our business license? doesn't make sense.
Your worship, I guess the comment I can make to that is, as we've reviewed our costs and our impacts from the legalization of cannabis as we track them, it's difficult for us to say that it's been a significant increase in our costs. I think we have a report a little bit later that talks about the enforcement side. Frankly, now that we've gotten through a few of the first retail business development permit applications, so on and so forth, we're getting a hang of that. So, Your Worship, I guess the best answer I can give you on that is just simply that we haven't seen that dramatic increase in cost that we may have thought we would see going back a year or 18 months ago. Again, it's a new service, it's a new drug, I guess, or legalized drug. So we'll continue to monitor that or continue to watch it go through. But our best tracking of the costs that are directly related to cannabis, and whether it's its licensing or enforcement, simply are not materializing at the extent that we maybe thought they were.
Councillor Meyer?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a general comment. So from what I've understood about the legalization end of it, there has been a failure of the legal end to capture all of the market, I guess. And part of that being their inability to compete with the illegal, what still is illegal. I feel like the advantage that we might give the legal side might help push out the illegal end of it, and we will get a regulated industry that pays taxes and IDs customers, which is, I think, two things that the illegal end does not concern themselves with. So it is to our advantage to give these guys an advantage over their competition.
Okay, any questions, comments? No. I want to make a change, so if nobody's going to make it, Deputy Mayor, you have the chair. You just stand right there, you sit there. Yeah. Recognize me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion that we, on the business bylaw 2619 LIC 19, on page, whatever that page is, on page 59, under special services, under C, I'd like to leave that in there for C as cannabis production and distribution facility at $1,000 and remove the $150 per square foot. Everything else can be changed. The cannabis retail can be removed. Okay, and I'll speak to that. So we talk about things that we've seen in our community that has happened. So we've had cannabis retail stores. We have not yet had a production or distribution facility. We don't know how that's going to affect our community. And the fact that we are part of a group that is still advocating for cannabis excise tax, stating that there is an issue, it just kind of blows my mind that we're saying one thing on a provincial level, but we're doing something different here. Either it is an issue or it's not. If it's not an issue, then we should not be lobbying for it and we should not be taxing for it. But if we continue to lobby for it, then I think we still should be taxing it and have a business license so that we can see how that affects our community before we take it off. Since that we have not yet had cannabis production or distribution facilities, and it was mentioned that maybe the $1 per square foot was a hindrance. So that's my motion, is to remove that and just to leave the cannabis production distribution facility at $1,000. And everything else can be scratched off as recommended by administration.
So is that a motion that you've made?
Yes. I made a motion to alter that.
To alter it? Do we need a seconder to that?
No.
No? Okay. Anybody else wish to speak to that? Councillor Laurie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I do have a question through to administration. Mayor Choi mentioned in his comments on this that we have not yet had a cannabis production facility, and therefore we don't know any of the challenges that may come with that. Obviously, cannabis production facilities do exist throughout the province, and I'm wondering if administration has done any research into that, and as to if there are any challenges that communities that do have cannabis production facilities in place now are facing with that in their municipality.
Your Worship, to Councillor Laurie, I have referenced with some of my colleagues in some of the other counties, for instance. I can't speak to some of the urban centers, but to this point, there hasn't been any, I guess, additional impacts on the production side.
Thank you very much for that. And Mr. Chair, if I may continue with the comment. Thank you. You mentioned about the lobbying for tax dollars and so on and so forth. And while I completely agree that we should be lobbying the provincial government for the cannabis excise tax, what you're proposing is to essentially tax these companies twice. You're asking to tax them for us to collect a portion municipally, and then you're asking for the provincial and the federal government to tax them. And we're lobbying for the provincial and federal government to roll those tax dollars down to us appropriately. So by putting in an additional tax, we are not actually accomplishing anything other than the fact that we're collecting revenue directly from businesses if we are able to attract them to our community by having this. I think it's right for us to continue to lobby the provincial government to roll down those cannabis excise tax dollars to us, and I don't feel it's fair to put the additional burden onto the business themselves to pay more taxes in order to fund those dollars to municipalities. Secondly, you bring up something very interesting with the cannabis production facilities, because considering cannabis production facilities are currently considered an agribusiness, therefore we are not allowed to charge property taxes on those buildings. Again, if we're looking at the proper revenue streams for these type of facilities, we should be advocating to the government to have these added in as a property tax inclusive property rather than one that is exempt from it by being an agricultural business. This is a production facility for a product that goes to market that is not tax-free like your groceries at your grocery store. Therefore, it should be included as a property taxable building within the municipality. I don't feel it's right to add a secondary tax on top of them for us to collect tax dollars. I think it's right for us to continue to lobby and advocate to the government to pass down the tax dollars that were committed to the communities, and that the federal government has directed the provinces that they should be doing appropriately.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I too am going to speak against this motion. I don't have a justification for it. To me, the tax what we're advocating with AUMA is completely different than taxing our own businesses when no one else around us does. I think it puts us at a real disadvantage. And last year when we did this, I was pretty proud of us. I thought we were, stepping up. We were covering the what ifs. We were being very, very safe in what we were proposing for our community. But it has turned out that there is no extra cost. I would have trouble justifying if anybody asked me why we are now charging $1,000 for a cannabis retail or cannabis distribution facility. I can't justify it, so I won't be voting for that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett.
Just for clarification, it is not
the retail.
The retail, right?
Yeah,
Retail is taken off. It's just the distribution and production facility.
Yeah.
Councillor Matties.
Thank you. I just want to again support both what Councillor Bennett said and also Councillor Laurie, that I would like to see consistent fees. I don't see, again, a justification for it, and I think that we need to ensure that we have an environment where we are welcoming businesses to our community.
Thank you. Any further question? Would you like to close?
Oh, yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I referenced the fact that I agree with maybe looking at the stuff that we have, that we've seen in our community, and removing that. But something that we have not yet seen in our community is probably better for us to be more cautionary and to add that $1,000 there, removing the $1.50 per square foot, which makes it in line with all the other specialized businesses that we have in our community, which, again, our record or Savage Yard is $1,500. A boxing and wrestling promoter is $1,500. Carnival or circus is $500. Christmas tree sale is $50. Escort or dating service is $1,500. And ice cream vendor or mobile or temporary is $125. And a massage parlor is $1,500. So my argument is, if we're going to have special services and we separate them now, then I think we should have cannabis production facility, because that's a special service in the community. And as mentioned by Councilor Laurie, production facilities are right now considered farmland, so that we have to tax them at a lower rate. So therefore, the generations of taxes on the property value is a lot less than what other buildings would be. So I'm not asking to change everything, I just want to have that back in there, and then we can review it in another year.
Thank you, Your Worship. Seeing no more hands up, I'll call the question. Those in favor of the amendment? Those opposed? So carried. I'll pass the chair back to you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and that was a good exercise for what's coming up later on. And moving forward, we're back to the original motion, which was recommended by administration for first reading. Any more questions and debate on that? Councilor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship. Being that this is first reading and this will be coming back to us, I was for second and third reading. I'm wondering if, when this comes back to us, if administration would be able to bring a little bit of a report in respect to production facilities, particularly in any urban centers, and provide us with any feedback that you are able to acquire during that period.
Your Worship, to Councilor Laurie, absolutely.
Can you do that? Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? So I'll call the question for first reading. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Moving on to 8.2, which is the excuse me, bylaw 2621 DNP 19, and then that is Councilor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I make a motion that Town Council give third reading to the bylaw 2621/DNP/19 for the purpose of establishing the subdivision authority, and to repeal the Municipal Planning Commission bylaw 2499/DNP/13.
Okay. Administration, any background?
Your Worship, we have nothing further to add at third reading. The report remains the same as first and second reading. However, we would be available to answer any questions if as needed.
Okay. Thank you. So members of council, we had a great and lengthy discussion last meeting. We did first, second reading. We didn't get unanimous consent, so it comes back for third reading. Anything new to add to the conversation? Okay, Councilor Meyer?
Just a general comment that I have had an opportunity to talk with a few other people, and much of my concerns have been alleviated. I think I can I'm well prepared to support the motion this evening.
Okay. Anything new to add to the conversation? Councilor Matties?
I too have done my research, and I also concur with Councillor Meyer that I do believe that this change would be a positive one for the community.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, seeing that, just maybe a housekeeping motion, comment from administration. Since we just had our organization meeting where we appointed a chair for the Municipal Planning Commission, because that was outlined in this bylaw, since we're repealing and changing that, do we have to go back and make a motion to change that? And also to the appointments of the MPC, because I think the recommendation is that we fold it over to an advisory, subdivision advisory board. Yes, so if we had all three meetings, then we could have done it.
Your Worship, if the bylaw if this third reading is passed, it would nail those, so we would go and update the schedules reflecting this change. So no further motion after this bylaw would be passed tonight.
Okay. So then we don't have to worry about the motion to appoint Councilor Laurie as chair?
No, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. With that, see no more hands up. Call the question, all in favor? Okay, and that is carried. Thank you very much. I think you're.
What did you say? It's the shortest living chair appointment I've ever had.
All right, moving on to business item 9.1, the cannabis land use update. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to kind of build off a few of the information that my colleague Sean McCauley has already done, there were 10 development permit applications for cannabis retail stores applied for, of which 9 have been approved, 3 have been opened, and there's 1 permit that was canceled. In terms of cannabis production facilities, 1 application was applied for and approved, and my understanding is with the business license, it is still waiting for to go ahead from there. In terms of the sale of cannabis edibles, they will be available in December, and the administration has reviewed the land use bylaw, and it already addresses both the production as well as the sale of cannabis edibles. If you have any questions, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay. So members of council, any questions or comments regarding 9.1? Councillor Bennett?
Just for clarification, we're not changing anything in that bylaw.
Through your worship to Councillor Bennett, that is correct.
Yes.
Seems to be working well.
Yes, I think the administration's report was that it's working well, and it covers both retail and then also edibles as well. So, okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, go ahead.
Just a question of clarification. Now, the retail cannabis outlets, is it a different outlet to sell edibles, or is it's the same place? Okay, no, that's fine.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. See none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to 9.2, the cannabis consumption bylaw. Go ahead, administration.
Your Worship, members of council, carrying on with the cannabis theme this evening, we have the cannabis consumption bylaw that was adopted last year as a reaction to the legalization of cannabis in Canada. Administration did the due diligence with respect to understanding that what are you calling them now? Edibles were coming onto the market 1 year after the legalization of cannabis. So we did add verbiage in our bylaw, which would be consume, and consume is to ingest cannabis. So like the provincial legislation, they added the word consume also, so that they didn't have to go back through the lengthy process of adjusting their bylaws. The difficulty and challenge with consumption and edibles is we're not aware of any testing devices on the market that we would have access to dip into a gummy bear bag, and we wouldn't have justification to walk down the street and inspect every single package of gummy bears or brownies or any other form that people may choose, chocolate bars that they may choose to put cannabis in. So it's a tricky situation that we'll have to continue monitoring on the federal and the provincial level in terms of if we have to bring a bylaw back for adjustment to allow us to have more authorities, then we will certainly do that. From that perspective, we would treat someone ingesting or consuming edibles, we would probably enforce their behavior as opposed to how they got to that state. So if someone is walking through a park and they're not acting in accordance to how we expect them to act because they may be impaired, and we can't assume that that's drugs or alcohol. There's some determining factors that would permit us the opportunity to understand if that was alcohol or another substance, but we would deal with the behavior, and the behavior would be something that's well within our enforcement capacities, and we would use our other agencies to assist us with that if it became a criminal code issue. So the edible one is a bit tricky, but our bylaw does cover us with respect to if we have good evidence that suggests that there's an edible there and it's not in line with our bylaw, we do have the ability to enforce that. And again, because edibles are on the market now, we'll continue to monitor the federal and the provincial side, as I believe that they may have some reaction to that too if needed down the road.
And I need a motion for 9.1. If I can have Councillor Lloyd. Oh, 9.2, sorry.
9.2, yes. Yes, the town council accept the cannabis consumption bylaw 2595/G/18, 12-month review for information.
With that, thank you. Administration, any more comments from members of council? Okay, council. Go ahead, Council Matters.
Your Worship. Thank you. To administration, I have a question. For example, in Camrose, I noticed on their website they had a bit of information with regards to cannabis in their community, and they said cannabis can be consumed residential, private property, and in designated smoking areas. Can you tell me what other communities in Alberta are allowing smoking in designated smoking areas or consumption?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Matties, I can't give you the definitive. We did a pretty thorough report when we brought forward the cannabis consumption bylaw last 12 months ago, which stated which communities were providing it under a smoking component or basically abolishing it completely in their communities. Town of Stony Plain has chosen to not have it in a public place, so in a residence or in a private venue that permits the use of it. That's fair game. But in a public venue or a public setting, we have determined that cannabis is not acceptable to be smoken, vaped, or consumed in a public place. So I don't think the town of Stony Plain necessarily needs to change that approach or that perspective, as I believe it's cannabis is not for everyone, and in a public place, the expectation is that people can go and use those public spaces and be happy with the use that they're hoping to have in that public space.
Just to follow up with that, I would appreciate, because I know this is just for information, but it would have been nice to had it reviewed with regards to any changes that we've seen in other communities, and I would like to know what other communities are allowing consumption in whatever, if it's a designated smoking area or whatever they're doing, but to basically say this is okay, it's no different than what we did with the last bylaw. We've had new information and we changed it, and it would be nice to have additional information that just confirms what we decided on a year ago, or that allows us to make a change to that.
Thank you for comments. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just some further commentary on this. First, I'll express a little bit of concern in respect to the verbiage of may not smoke, attempt to smoke, vape, or consume what appears to be cannabis in any public place within town limits. I think our general manager was very clear. We have no definitive testing device to determine what is and isn't cannabis, and it leaves this bylaw as one that I feel is virtually almost non-enforceable. I think there are certain instances where it definitely will be, and I believe that is most likely along the smoking side. As I've continued to look at, same as Councillor Matties, into what other communities are doing, I find, as comments were made, many people don't like the smell of cannabis smoke. Well, many people also don't like the smell of cigarette smoke. Many people don't also like the smell of the vape smoke, et cetera, et cetera. And many communities are now actually looking at their smoking bylaws rather than their cannabis consumption bylaws. Because it's very difficult, as we've already heard, to determine who walking down the street eating a gummy bear is eating a gummy bear that is infused with cannabis or just a gummy bear from 7-Eleven that's not. And those become some very difficult challenges. I do very much appreciate the comments from the general manager about intoxication and enforcing what we can around intoxication, because I think that's incredibly important. It doesn't matter what substance you are under the influence of. If you're intoxicating and not abiding by the bylaws in the community that exist for behavior, that is something I think is much more stringent for us to be enforcing. Many people also use cannabis for reasons other than just recreation, and so we look at some potential limiting in here, and I know obviously there's superseding laws throughout the country that allow them to consume that cannabis. So I would like to see potentially going forward us look at a smoking bylaw, a bylaw that addresses all forms of smoking within our community, that being tobacco, vape, and cannabis, so that we can have a much more pleasant environment for all people within our community. Because personally, I can tell you, when I'm walking down Main Street with my children, it wouldn't matter whether it's cannabis, whether it's tobacco, or whether it's something from a vape. I don't appreciate walking through a cloud of any one of the three. So I think it's something that we seriously need to start taking a look at in our community. We need to look at our smoking bylaws, determine whether the provincial smoking regulations are sufficient enough for our community or if they should be extended. That also might alleviate some of the potential issues in where cannabis, people who consume cannabis are not able to do so in their residence because it's not a private, personally owned residence, and then there is nowhere in town for them that they are able to consume that product. I do think we will see continual provincial changes come forward now that edibles are being legalized. I'm sure cannabis cafes and those type of things are not too far behind. So I think we will continue to need to adapt to this. But when it comes to public consumption, I think it should be looked at from the smoking perspective rather than just the individual cannabis itself perspective.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions regarding this? Cool. Okay, see none. This is just for information, so I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to 9.3 is the 2019 third quarter report. And go ahead, administration.
Your worship, again, pleased to provide the third quarter report, number of facts and figures and some updates on what's transpired over the last 3 months, so to speak. Your worship, we can certainly answer any questions that council may have, or we can certainly answer any more questions council may have.
Okay. Thank you. So members of council, have you had a chance to read the third quarter report? And then I believe after this it gets spread out to the public. So any questions and comments regarding the stats that are shown here? Deputy Mayor? I'm sorry. Nope. Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just on page 95, in regards to Edmonton Global, I was wondering if administration could expand on what the 6 expressions of interest were. Were those potential businesses, or were those potential initiatives on behalf of Edmonton?
Your worship, to Councillor Meyer, those were in relation to production facilities, cannabis-related production facilities.
Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Lowry.
Thank you, Your Worship. The first one I have is in relation to page 113 in respect to the Stony Plain Outdoor Pool. The Stony Plain Outdoor Pool has been operated under the Part 9 Corporation with the TLC for the last, I believe, 2 or 3 years now. And I'm just wondering if at some point in time in the near future, council might receive a report back on the operations of the Stony Plain Outdoor Pool under that corporation and what the financial analysis of that is. Reason I'm curious on that is I'm just wondering if the TLC is able to see a profit with respect to the outdoor pool, and if there should be some discussion around council as to whether we should look at asking if that should then be reduced from our municipal ask within the TLC's budget.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Lowry. So that topic has come up at the general manager level with respect to with that. From the town of Stony Plain's perspective, we do look at the numbers, and we do look at, is it on par with us operating it ourselves, or are we actually saving a few dollars with the operation going with the TLC? The other factors that we do monitor is how much effort are we freeing up from our staff having to do the day-to-day management of that particular endeavor. So from that perspective, I can report to you that we're not paying more money, and we're not losing money with respect to this, and it's a great relationship. And the other component to it is the staff that come over from the Untitled Chapter Center. Typically, the TLC is losing staff in the summer months because they want to come to the Stony Plain Outdoor Pool. So this has provided a tremendous benefit from both of our perspectives with respect to retention of staff related to aquatics in the area. A lot of the times the wages are on par. We have to look at the TLC, and we have to charge the same wages or afford the same wages to staff coming to the town of Stony Plain. The difference is we're not hiring a second manager. The manager is coming with the pool, so there are some efficiencies that are being created with respect to this relationship. So at this point, we don't see a need to change from that. Should it start going the other way in terms of the TLC costing too much money for us to have them come and run the facility, then certainly we would be coming back to council with the report to say that we're reverting back to an in-house operation of that particular facility. With respect to whether or not the profit that they make, if they make any profit at all. I can't tell you that. You would have to ask the folks at the TLC with respect to that. I think that's for them to report back to the board whether or not they're doing it. I would assume that it's not costing them money, otherwise they wouldn't be doing it. We looked at that, and I think it's marginal. And for us to carve that out from our annual cost share, then we would probably have to look at is the operation of the outdoor rink that is on the grounds of the TLC. Do we reap the benefit of that in addition to Parkland County and Spruce Grove, or does the city of Spruce Grove only take the benefit of that particular facility if they start to rent it after the fact, and the maintenance related to that, which we're all sharing at this point too. So I would hope that anything that they're making off the relationship between ourselves is certainly covering the cost, so that it's not an increased cost across the board for all three parties related to that particular relationship.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll continue on, Your Worship. On page 114, we talk about the Stony Plain Golf Course, which, personally, fantastic conditions. I think the reputation within the industry has certainly improved, which I believe will show some very positive results for the golf course. I'm just curious, with the new food and beverage setup that we have there, will the golf course restaurant continue to operate throughout the winter, or is that going to be similar to years past as to where it was on banquet and bookings only? And are there any other initiatives that the golf course will be working on to continue 365-day operations?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Laurie, that's a good question. This being our first year running the food and beverage at the golf course, we're cautiously moving into the winter season. It is a destination spot, so people physically have to drive there. We're not relying on foot traffic. We're not in a good location for people just to drop in and have lunch, like a downtown restaurant as an example. There are days where the restaurant is hopping during the operational season, and there are days that it's not. So I think the bulk of the traffic will be related to banquets, related to booked events. Otherwise, we may have staff that are there for a number of hours and not see any traffic at all. So we can increase promotions related to that, but there's still a cost to have ovens on, fryers on, and staff there just in case someone walks into the facility. We do have the simulator, it's the golf simulator, which is now active and are available for booking. So the restaurant hours will probably be around the operation or use of that particular piece of equipment. We do have a lot of folks that typically are going into the Edmonton area to use that type of technology and have committed to using it here at home because it eliminates the travel back and forth to the city of Edmonton. So we are gaining quite a few folks and leagues that the staff are developing around that particular piece of infrastructure, to the point where we're looking at, do we have to consider more of those simulator, but we're going to stick with the one for this year and make it a good event.
Excellent, appreciate it. I'm glad to hear that there's some good initiatives going on and some cautious optimism moving forward for the winter season. I have a couple more, but if you'd like to pass it along for a little bit.
Okay, Councillor Mannies.
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple of things that I've noted with regards to, and I'm going back to the FCSS, it's related to what we're talking about tonight, right now with the third quarter report, but on the FCSS, on page 130, page 152, you have a director's message. And I spoke in the past about having a CAO's corner that just basically talks about the priorities that we're working on, some of the status that we're associated. So it's basically one page is a snapshot of the status of the important priorities that we're working at this time. I just found, and I know this is not an exact example, but it just basically gave me some of the highlights of FCSS and what's going on there. And I'd sure like to see that as a possible addition to our quarterly reports. And then with regards to our quarterly reports, on a number of times I see that we look at, for example, this year and then we compare it to last year, but then there's many times where we do not make that comparison. And I would really like to be able to, whenever it's possible, be able to kind of just gauge what happened last year and where we are today, so that I can ask a question related to that if I need to. A couple of questions I have this evening is on page 102. which is related to the fire responses by category. And a question that kind of stood out for me is that there's alarms, there's 50 alarms in Stony Plain in the third quarter and 14 in Parkland County. Why is there such a big difference in that? Like, do we have some information? Are most of them false alarms in Stony Plain, or what happens there? So I'd like to have some feedback on that. And then I'd also like to have some feedback with regards to our housing starts, which are on page 100.
Okay, we'll deal with the alarms. I think it's just because we have more alarm buildings in our community versus in Parkland County. Go ahead, Administration.
Your Worship, through the Councillor Matties, yes, that's a fair explanation, is we're a more dense population, so more folks, more people in the community are putting house alarms in. There's probably a person every week walking around the community trying to sell someone on a house alarm, and a lot of people are certainly putting those in their properties, and you can have a police, fire, or medical response, depending on what's hit, what's not hit, and sometimes the fire department is called more often, and the RCMP are called more often than a medical response. So some communities will look at this particular category and determine and suggest that maybe we're getting a lot of false alarms, and maybe we need a false alarm bylaw where we're starting to charge people for us responding, because it is resources that go out and respond to the community. I'm not hearing from the fire chief that is becoming, or the inspector at the RCMP detachment, that's certainly becoming a problem. But with more people, more technology, more things are being placed in homes, which is causing people and emergency responders to respond to private residences, whether it's by accident or because they need to be there for a particular incident.
And then to page 100, the housing starts.
Yeah, the housing starts. So we've had 14 housing starts in 9 months in terms of detached and semi-detached. And again, I'd like to kind of have a comparison of how we're doing relative to, say, last year or the year before.
Is it on that page?
So on page
100? I think it shows you all the quarterly up to 2010.
Yeah, but it doesn't show the numbers. Like you got a graph, right? Of total dollar value, is that right? So
And the number of permits is on the other side.
where am I? Sorry, where?
So on the other side is permits, so one permit is per.
Okay, so if I'm going to, it's hard to exactly evaluate that, right? So you've got up to 20, so that's saying,
So saying in the third quarter, I would guess that's probably about 16 or 17 permits, and then in 2018, that would be just a little bit higher than 2018.
it would be great if there was, as opposed to us having to like detail try to assess it, it would be nice if there would just be a summary that kind of says, hey, we're up from last year, seeing some progress. Just a little bit of commentary would help on some of these things as well. So it's just, if we have the information, it's just nice to be able to, for whoever's reading this, be able to see how the progress, how we're doing overall.
Good. Thank you for your comments. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple questions. One on page 110 of our package. I just have to think what it was.
Canada Day celebrations.
Oh, no, Community Initiatives Grant Program. So I see that we had 13 groups requesting funding, 9 were granted funding, and the total allocated was 10,000 out of the 18,000 that we have available. I'm just wondering why those, why we couldn't have supported more, because we had only 10,000 that we granted.
Your Worship, through the Councillor Bennett, without looking at the 9 applications that were not funded and seeing if perhaps they were missing information, they didn't qualify because they were from Devon and not the town of Stony Plain, as an example. I can't definitively tell you exactly why 9, but typically our staff and the town of Stony Plain is more on the lenient side than the hard and fast, we will not fund you side. So I would suggest to you that probably they didn't qualify because there were some basic things that just were not met in the application, i.e. they may have been from a jurisdiction that just didn't qualify, or they pulled the application, or there were just some missing parts, and perhaps they've been asked to go back and correct that, and they may be funded in the future. But as of this point, these are the stats.
So with this community initiatives grant, is it only for the rental of our Heritage Pavilion, or what all could they apply for?
Your Worship, through the Councillor Bennett, so the application is quite broad, and it assists groups to get off the ground and start new initiatives in the town of Stony Plain, and the money can be utilized in any form that groups choose. So if they would like to use it for advertising or starting up or things that qualify under the grant, they're certainly permitted to do so. A lot of people tie it to that because before this grant, community groups would come to council and ask for permission to have their fees waived with the use of our facility. So some will tie it to that directly, but if you look through their budget, they could apply it to several different categories, not just the rental of our facilities. But sometimes that is the bigger cost of their particular event that they're hosting.
Thank you. Also on page 119.
Sorry, Your Worship, if I can just interject there quickly. The other thing too, for council's understanding, that 18,000 is typically entirely allocated on any given calendar year, any given fiscal year for us. So I know this one says 10/8 to the end of the third quarter. Typically, this is the full 18,000 is allocated through the process as described by the general manager.
Before I go on to page 119, could I also ask Mr. Mayor, I know this is a third quarter report, and so it won't have the numbers or the answers in it, but I'm wondering about the program that we began last year with opening up the pavilion for walkers and for young mums with strollers. I'm just wondering if that's going to be continued this year.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Bennett, we don't have any reason not to continue it, unless we get some rental that, and the people that come to those two programs, which would be the pickleball and the walking groups, they're all aware that if we get a rental that comes in that's prepared to pay a large sum, that we would cease those two activities. But if we have the space and we have the time and the capacity, we will certainly continue on with those programs. And I think that will happen until such time that the building changes where we're not able to permit it, or we have a different location of which suits that activity better.
And will it be the same kind of time? There were I think only 3 or 4 days that people could access that space.
Your Worship, again, through to Councillor Bennett, that would depend on the building, the use of the building, but certainly they would try to maintain the consistency so that people are not showing up and being turned away.
Thank you. Now on to page 119, Mr. Mayor, please.
Yes.
My question is under planning and infrastructure. When it comes to urban forestry, there was $40,000 in the budget, and it doesn't look like any of it has been spent. I'm just wondering if some of that $40,000 could be utilized in the Willow Park natural area that we heard about today, or exactly where that money is targeted for.
Through your worship to Councillor Bennett, that project has been allocated for the new year, just with the amount of planning initiatives we have this year and the capacities. We've pushed that project into the new year, and I believe the full $40,000 is expected to be spent on the project.
And what project is that?
In terms of completing an urban forestry strategy.
Oh, so this is just the plan?
Yes, that is correct.
Actually for trees?
No, unfortunately.
Ah, okay. Another plan.
No more hands up. Back to Councillor Laurie. I'll go back to Councillor Laurie. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Referring to page 115 of our package. Sorry, of course I can't get to it here. There we go. For our budget position, similar to what Councillor Matties had presented just in respect to viewpoints, it would be nice to see not only our 2019 budgets and actuals, but the 2018 budget and actuals. And as well, it would be nice to include percents. So, I mean, I know that this being a third quarter report, that everything should be around 75%. In respect to revenue and expenses, with a few exceptions because of when certain expenses are due and when certain revenues are collected. But it'd just be really easy then on the eye to be able to determine, okay, you know, I can see that this is maybe a little low, this is a little high. And for instance, I mean, fines, now we know typically the reason for fines is just because of not having a photo radar contractor for a certain amount of time. But it would give me a good idea without having to grab the calculator, do the percentage out to see maybe how short we're falling. So just maybe a few tweaks that can be made to the report to make it a little more readable to the eye, a little bit easier to decipher some of the information that's in there. And I do have a question in respect to page 120. In the reserves and the reserve projection for the year-end projected balance in comparison. I know we have a lot of projects on the way and a lot of projects in the plan that are utilizing reserve dollars, which is obviously reflected in this. From September to year-end, our projected reserve balance is to depreciate by $9,362,977. I'm just wondering if administration can highlight maybe the key major projects that make up that total reduction in the reserves. And I know I've seen some of them in the page below in respect to downtown and the new fire apparatus and so on, but it didn't quite all add up into that 9 million. So just, again, a quick summary from administration to highlight some of the major contributors to that.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Laurie, the large reduction from September to the year-end projected balance, am I understanding you? That's the difference that you're looking for explanation on? So that difference would be any approved projects that are not yet spent. Mm-hmm. So it may not fully anticipate projects like Miles indicates that, you know, those dollars were approved, mm-hmm. but we're not probably going to spend by year-end. This would show the full approved amount projected to being spent at December at the year-end balance, if that helps. The largest one you've hit bang on is that downtown redevelopment. That's the one that comes to mind for me for sure. That's the big dollar sitting there. I'm just seeing if there's any others that come to mind.
Yeah, and the downtown redevelopment, from what I understand, like, so the water and the sewer reserves are the ones that take the biggest hit from that. And that's approximately 5.5 million. Which still leaves almost 4 million, and I'm struggling to find all of that within there. I mean, there's $1 million from the Heritage Park Reserve, and I'm not sure what project that is for the $1 million on that. Or maybe that's part of a debenture repayment or something along those lines. I'm not 100% sure, and I'm wondering if there's any other large ones that maybe just aren't segregated out themselves that you could bring our attention to.
Your Worship, I could respond by email. I'm sorry, nothing's coming to mind right at this moment, but there is a detailed spreadsheet that would show me that breakdown. I just don't have it at my fingertips right at this moment.
That'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Councillor Matties?
Your Worship, through to administration, my questions are with regards to the handy bus. And just trying to assess from quarter 3 2019, we had 143 riders versus quarter 3 2018, it was 151. And then we had some group trips. And it's a little difficult for me to kind of understand, is the service and the need for the service growing? Where are we at?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Matties, I would suggest to you that the trend is the service is trending to needing more. That's certainly why we're having discussions with the City of Spruce Grove in terms of how we can both be more efficient with our two services. One, that's to ensure that neither of us have to incur additional expenses moving forward, and can we get people into the city more effectively and efficiently, not have two vehicles from the same local jurisdiction sitting in the same parking lot necessarily. So the trend is increasing. So we do definitely have people that are calling more frequently with it, it's one of those cyclical programs. If people move away from the community or unfortunately with the demographic that we're dealing with pass away, the numbers change and they move up and down. But certainly over the last 2 years, we're in, you know, in the larger percentage of increased client load for sure.
Two other questions. With regards to the groups, there's 10 groups in July. What number of people would be in those groups, and where are they going? And are we seeing an increased trend in group?
Your Worship, through the Councillor Maddie. So from a group perspective, from time to time, we plan trips out to the Ukrainian Village or West Edmonton Mall or other destination points that seniors in some of the homes or just as clients have communicated they would like to travel to. So on days where we don't have a large client load and we have the ability to take the larger vehicle, which is a 12-passenger van, we plan a trip. There's a cost to it. So basically the number would be 12 because we only have so many seats in the particular vehicle, and often it's there and we make sure that the numbers are conducive to us going back and forth. So if we have one person, we're certainly not going to drive to Elk Point as an example. It just, from the expense perspective, it doesn't make sense for us to do that. We've got 12 people. It makes sense for us to have a driver plus the vehicle and the time that it takes to allow that trip to happen.
And do you see the group need increasing as we have additional seniors facilities in the community and additional people moving to the community? Are you seeing an increase in that?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Maddie's, that's a challenging question from the perspective if we offer more people will probably take us up on that offer, but we do have to ensure that we're maintaining the service levels that we're providing, which is getting people to their appointments and those types of things. We do also work with the other, like Rehoboth and those folks. They have their own buses that take people in to do their own trips from time to time too. So we're pretty mindful of who's doing what in the community related to similar services, so we're not overlapping and we're enhancing what's already existing in the community.
One other question is with regards to the Sequoia Exchange. Do we have a budget for the Sequoia Exchange? Is there any funding required? I never see any dollars or anything associated with it.
Your Worship, we do have an annual budget for the exchange, and we do receive dollars from the town of Chicowie and the Education Board of Education to assist in the delivery of that. So we budget $30,000 annually, which assists us to send students over, but that's dependent on the expenses related to it. Plus, we also have expenses when we have adult delegations and chaperones attending. So as an example, an expense for us would be when you hosted them for supper on the Tuesday evening, that would be an expense that's not paid by the delegation coming from Japan to Stony Plain. The delegation coming from Japan to Stony Plain, they have hotel rooms, so part of the money that is sent is to assist in ensuring that those expenses are paid for.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Going back to the handy bus, I'm just wondering if administration can help me to understand how this program actually works. What type of hours do we run the handy bus? Who runs it? How do they book that handy bus? You talk about new and it growing. When I look at the numbers, I don't see a growth pattern to it. I see a small number to it. I see small kilometers comparative to other communities that run a service that would be comparable to what we have here. So I'm just wondering if you could help me to understand that a little better.
Your Worship, through to Deputy Mayor Palechko, this service is a service that clients would book. It's not a scheduled service. So if you had some aged parents in a home and you would like to access a service because you're from a different community and they have to get into specialized appointments, you would work with our coordinator to book those times, book those dates, and we would discuss with you the costs related to that, and you would give us the okay to either engage us or not engage us to provide that service. We do have people that have cognitive disabilities that we also provide transportation services to job sites. As an example, Some folks work at Walmart, so we do pick them up and we drive them over to that location. Often, when people call in and they request the service, we're writing out a schedule that most effectively uses the vehicle. So it's not pick up one person, drive them, drop them off, drive back to town. We try to be more effective and more efficient with our operations than that. The bus probably goes out less than the van. The van probably, you see the van rolling around town a lot more than the bus, because on any given day our numbers are lower. The bus is typically used when we have a number of wheelchairs because it has more space. We can adjust the seats so that we can accommodate more walkers, wheelchairs, those types of things. Or if it's a shopping trip, we understand that there'll be more packages on the bus from that particular exercise. So the more space is more conducive to that particular type of trip. But certainly it's you phone in, you tell us what your needs are, and we coordinate the needs and the schedule based on a number of phone calls that we may receive from clients that are wishing to access this service. So it's not like a typical transit service or a DAT service where you pay a scheduled fee and they come around and pick you up on a frequency schedule. There's no schedule per se. The hours of operation are typically the same hours of operation that we would have the office open, because that's when typically people are asking for the use of this particular vehicle. On occasion, we've done some after-hour transportation, but that typically has been on a special need perspective. It's not the typical. I would say the typical is more your 7 a.m. to 5 or 6 p.m. at night.
Just to follow up to that then. So do we employ full-time employees that are directly related to the bus, or do we have a group of people from town that we can draw from that will accommodate the people that are calling? And of that portion, how many people do we actually turn away because we don't have a full-time service?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Plechko. So our service has been designed based on the need, and we do have part-time drivers that are not full-time. They don't work. There's 3 of them that have various hours, and it's not full-time hours. So when we talk about this is the hours that we run, it's not full-time hours that we're operating because the need is not there for full-time. But certainly with the type of vehicle we have and the types of trips that we're doing, on occasion, there's opportunity for us to have an additional vehicle from time to time, but we do work with our partners to ensure that we can get people to where they need to be at the times that they need to get there. So we do have good relationships with NeighborLink as an example. There's a couple of other places that if we can't meet the need, we certainly direct people into other partners that can assist them and help them with that. We don't have definitive stats with respect to how many we turn away from time to time, because sometimes it's not us turning them away because we can't provide the service. Sometimes the fee is not in alignment with what people are prepared to pay, or we're not able to provide the service because of the schedule. So it's very infrequent that we're able to provide. We typically try to accommodate the need of all folks that call into us.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments regarding the third quarter report? See none. Thank you, administration, for providing the report. It is very in-depth, and it provides a lot of information for our residents to see. It's good to refresh what happened in the quarter. Okay. And after this is approved, then I'm guessing the communications will be going out to sharing the information out?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay. Sounds good. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's carried. Moving on to 9.4. Oh, yeah. That's right. Councillor Matties.
Town Council accept the 2019 third quarter report for information.
Right. Good. Any other questions? Okay, call the question. No, that's done. Okay, 9.4. This is the Stony Plain FCSS third quarter report. Does the administration have anything to provide in addition to the written material?
No, Your Worship. Not at this time.
Okay. So Councillor Bennett, motion please.
I move the town council accept the Stony Plain FCSS 2019 third quarter report for information.
Okay, members of council, any questions, comments regarding that? Okay, see none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that ends our business items. Moving on to council information, council discussion. And we'll start with Deputy Mayor.
Thank you,
Anything
Your
to report?
Worship. Just a couple of things, reporting in from a couple of boards that I sit on. The Pioneer Museum, I'm pleased to announce that we have an agreement in place with them that is a long-term standing agreement that carried unanimous. So we're back to a very good working relationship with the individuals over there, and I continue to sit on that board, and I look forward to sitting on that board. And the second one is the Multicultural Center as well. They've entered into an agreement with the town to work in partnership with them as well. That was passed as a unanimous agreement. So I excused myself from both those meetings so that I was nonpartisan to it, and was quite excited to see that we will be able to move forward with some great working relationships. And I'd like to thank our town manager for seeing those two through and getting them done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Mr. Mayor, in regards to Deputy Mayor's report, will we have an update as to what those agreements were and how it exactly what the understandings were that we agreed to?
Your Worship, I can certainly provide like an updated, like an email update just to maybe refresh council's memory. Both those items were some time ago, and just outline the parameters, so to speak, of both agreements and the arrangements going forward.
Actually, if administration can just find those motions that were passed by council, and you can just resend it back out to council. That was some time ago. Okay, go ahead.
I was able to attend the neighbors dinner 2 weeks ago. And so that always gives me an opportunity to talk to people. And one of the discussions was about the stormwater pond, the new one on 779. And some residents who live near that were telling me that often children go around that stormwater pond, and there's really no fencing or anything like that. And those residents are quite concerned that it's not a safe area, and they were asking about fencing. I indicated that when it's finished, it'll be a trail around it, probably something similar to West Terra. I hope I was correct. But in the meantime, no, I wasn't correct. But in the meantime, it's an open area, and school children are tempted by that kind of area to ride their bikes around the berm.
So I can answer that because I had a similar conversation with another resident regarding the same thing of our standards of fencing storm ponds. The point is that we do not fence storm ponds, period. So those residents that live right adjacent to it, I had a meeting with them and looked at their property line. If they wanted to, they can build their own fence to keep their children in.
It's not their own children.
Or other people's children, but that's, if you look around through our community and you walk around with your dog, Rotary Park is a great example. Well, that's a storm pond, but we don't fence it. There's actually a walking trail very, very close to it, right? We rely on, parent supervision and, teaching your kids not to jump in the water when it's not safe. So we can't fence everything in our community to make it bubble safe for all our kids.
And Mr. Mayor, that's exactly what I was saying, but I got an indication from our administration that this particular stormwater pond will not have a walking path around it, and will not be a nice community gathering space as some of our other stormwater ponds are. So could administration just address that so that.
Yeah, Your Worship, certainly make a couple comments on that. To begin with, and I may defer to the General Manager of Planning and Infrastructure for any specifics on that 779 stormwater pond, although I don't believe it's intended for any future recreational development, so to speak, in and around it. But I'll allow him an opportunity to speak to that directly in a minute or so, Your Worship. I would make a few comments just on a broader note on stormwater management ponds and their safety. Again, it's obviously a good thing that there's concerns like that out there. There's not too many instances in any given year where someone will have accident or frankly fatality or whatnot related to a stormwater pond, but they do happen from time to time. I think a lot of municipalities have as we've built more storm ponds throughout our communities, done a bit more, have put some stuff out there and just the general safety commentary of being in a community that these things are not they are a functioning storm ponds. I know we see a lot of that during the winter when there is ice on them, and you'll see things from whether it's the fire chief or staff just saying, there's water moving under there. That ice is not as thick as you may think it is. Please stay off, and so on and so forth. And there, signage is up and so on. You don't see a lot of fences, fully fenced storm ponds throughout communities. Sometimes if there are, certain areas, maybe specific circumstances, but I do think that's something that as we move along, and I know safety, is identified in our strategic plan, overall community safety, and often we think about whether it's speeding cars or pedestrians walking across streets and so on, or RCMP related safety issues. It is another one that we need to remind our community, remind ourselves to be aware of. So we'll take note of that moving forward, maybe just for some, a little more increased social media from time to time on safety awareness around storm ponds. I'll leave it at that, Your Worship. Perhaps the General Manager can add a little bit further to the 779 storm pond.
Your Worship, just to supplement I do know that we put signs up at all of our stormwater facilities basically on all four sides of them to remind residents that they're not recreational facilities to be used in summer or winter. So as we move forward with Alberta Transportation's recent addition to the system, we will evaluate the signage and other means to warn the public that the appropriate use and not use of those facilities.
So
Your Worship, too, if I may add, sorry, that's another thing to bear in mind that we can consider moving forward. Again, typically we will be involved in the construction of storm ponds, whether we're approving them as part of a development or we're constructing one on our own, whereas this one was, again, a little bit different in that it was a part of provincial government project. So, we may have to just review, see where they're at, see what's going on, see what's happening with that particular one.
Okay, thank you. But just to clarify then, that will never have a walking trail and
well, Your Worship, maybe I can speculate a bit here, but this would be speculation, and the General Manager may wish to be involved too. But should the rest of that quarter section, so to speak, see development at some point in time, that storm pond would likely be built around, worked with, whatever you want to call it, the rest of the development in that area. But I'm not anticipating that happening anytime in the foreseeable future, frankly, so I would expect it would stay in this fairly similar design and state as it is now.
I would have
Not
to
sure if
never.
the General Manager wants to add anything further, or?
Your Worship, yeah, and I think the town manager said it very well. We would look for all opportunities to enhance the community with the trails, et cetera, as the area around it develops. So that's something to be considered in the future.
Thank you. And then I did have one other comment. And this is for our communications department and for our radio station since he's here this evening. I was very happy to hear on the news this morning the article about the Friends of the Library Society and their fundraising efforts. It was great to get that message out, but some of the wording that was used gave me a bit of a, I thought maybe our residents will have some questions on that. I have it up on my screen, so I'll just refer to what I'm talking about. Friends of the Library is looking to raise $3 million to start construction on the new library, which will be located on, and so it's the start of the construction that, it's already started. I don't want our community to think we haven't started. And then the last paragraph, if funding is approved, construction will take 2 years to complete. And that's kind of a false statement since the funding has already been approved and construction has started. I don't know if our communications department can kind of talk to our radio station and clarify some of those misinformation pieces.
Okay, that sounds like an old news release that they're using.
This says Monday, October 28th.
Yeah, I'm saying it sounds like an old news release that they're using for their information. So maybe they just have.
Well, I think, I'm sorry to argue with Mr. Mayor, but I think what they're trying, the headline and the we want to get across is that the fundraising for a capital campaign is about to begin, and it's the Friends of the Stony Plain Public Library that is initiating that campaign. And that's the good news, and that's the news we want to get out to people. But not that funding is what we're waiting on to get the project started. So just a little bit of a tweak in that. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
So that's Friends of the Library. Okay. Councillor Matthews?
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to share, I was in Penticton last weekend and had the opportunity to visit the local library. There's 37,000 people that live in Penticton throughout most of the year, but in the summer the population pretty much doubles. So I was kind of surprised when it was smaller and older. Having said that, it was wonderful service and people were very friendly. But then I found out that a newly constructed library in the sister city, Summerland, where they have a growing population of 12,000 people, and their new library was 743 square meters, compared to what ours will be is 1,375 square meters. So I was pleased to know we'll have growth opportunity for our library moving forward, and I think that's just fantastic. The other thing that I had noticed and spent some time chatting with people about was the Westview, our Westview Health Center versus the Penticton Regional Hospital. And so Westview, we have 93,000 referral service area, whereas Penticton Regional Hospital, there's 90,000 South Okanagan referral area. And a few years ago, there was significant, or actually it's been long-term advocacy and planning for what was now a $3.12 million upgrade to the hospital, $312 million upgrade. And the cost was split between the Okanagan Similkameen Regional Hospital District, the Interior Health, and South Okanagan Similkameen Medical Foundation. The renovation started in 2014. It was completed in 2019. They had a patient care tower with 6-story tower with 84 rooms, 5 operating rooms, and a procedurals facility and a parkade, followed by renovations to the existing site. So it made me feel very excited that, as we continue to advocate, that we can have a hospital that meets the growing needs of this community as well, because that's exactly what they did in Penticton. So just wanted to share those two things.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews. Councillor Lowry?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of things to add. First and foremost, I just wanted to publicly recognize in chambers the town manager's response to my email in respect to the use of the term climate change in our storm utility bylaw release. I know that's stirred a little bit of concern in the community, and for clarity, the town manager did clarify, as we as council believe, that we have not adopted any specific position on climate change. The stormwater utility that we're looking at is based off of lived experience and engineered reports for where our current stormwater management issues are. We don't want to cloud that conversation with the totally different conversation conversation of climate change. So I just wanted to recognize, I appreciate the response and the caution in using those terms moving forward in our future releases. In respect to the stormwater ponds and them being fenced, there is a stormwater pond in our community that's fenced, and that does exist at the dog park. That's created a little bit of controversy throughout the community. I'm wondering if administration can speak to it. Apparently, I've been told that the gate that used to be able to be used by dog park attendants is now locked, and they are unable to access the stormwater pond from the dog park anymore. They've been told that that is now locked permanently, that will not be opened again come springtime. I'm just wondering again if I can have a little bit of clarity so we have a accurate message going out to residents when they approach with this concern.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Laurie, I don't have I'm not aware of the closure of that. However, I suspect it has something to do with the project up on the slope of that facility that caused us some concern. So to keep people out of the area, I'm suspecting that's the reason for the closure. However, I will check with our staff and confirm that.
Okay. And again, in the lines of communication to our public to ensure that they understand why those are closed. If we could maybe have some type of a proper formal notice then posted at the dog park to communicate to the users why that is closed and an approximation of the amount of time we anticipate that being closed. Obviously, going into the winter season, once the ice is on it, I'm sure nobody's dogs will really be trying to swim in there. However, come springtime, I'm sure people will anticipate that being open. So appreciate anything that can be done on that. And the last I have on that is obviously we have our corporate planning meetings coming up. We did receive an email today about some interruptions of our IT services. It sounds like our virtual desktops, which council uses to access all of our documents that are on the system, are potentially down for all of Saturday. So I'm just crossing my fingers that IT doesn't have any issues and we won't be down for too long there. Maybe just exercise some caution, of course. Keep council in communication as to if there are any delays. I know personally I'll be making sure I pull everything I can off and have it directly on my computer so I don't have to worry about having to hop onto the server to grab anything. But definitely looking forward to those discussions and the tough debates that we'll have in corporate plan over the next little week or so. And that's all for me this evening, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. How to broach it? Now that the snow is flying, I'm curious if the ongoing yard sale that has been going on for months is, if we have some kind of recourse to, because I don't think yard sales happen in the winter.
Your Worship, I believe, Councillor Meyer, I don't know the exact address, but I would expect you're speaking to, I think there's actually sort of two that I've noticed just right around the town office here. Your Worship, we can check into that, find out what the situation is there, and go from there. I'm not sure if the general manager wants to add anything further. I would say, I guess just to be forthright for council on this one, I'm sure there's a rule. I can't remember. I can't quote it. About how many days you can have a garage sale on any given year. I'm pretty sure that's in one of our bylaws somewhere. But in effect, if we're not receiving significant amounts of complaints, we may just allow things like that to continue to a certain degree. But I'll just leave it at that, Your Worship. That's sometimes how we will look at some of those things. One way similar to, we try to be reasonable on garage sale signs. We don't go out there absolutely right away and make people move them or take them down. The community tends to be pretty good at removing their own garage sale signs, so we've sort of just allowed that to kind of find its own way, so to speak. I'll leave it at that, Your Worship. I know exactly the two locations I believe Councillor Meyer is speaking of.
Thank you for bringing those up. So will we get an answer?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Meyer. Certainly, with the change in seasons, sometimes things translate to a garage sale to an unsightly, and we'll just handle it through a different form of bylaw. So in my time here, I have seen that property continue to be a garage sale during the nice days of the year, and typically it's cleaned up But I think probably this weather's caught a few people off guard with respect to coming in so quickly, even though it should be expected around this time of the year. But typically throughout the winter months, that property's not typically been the same as it is all year with the tarps and the different various products on the front lawn. So CPOs will treat that as an unsightly if that's the way it continues, and they'll go through the motions to ensure that it's handled accordingly.
Thank you. Anything else, Councilor Mayor? No. Thank you. Councilor Loy?
Yes, Your Worship. Nothing really to report. As you know, I was away for the last council meeting, so I'm just doing some catch-up as to what was discussed at that time and preparing for our deliberations.
Okay. Thank you. So before we go into closed session, and just like to highlight that on actually tomorrow, I think, is the Premier's address at the Empton Chamber. I believe a few of us are attending, so we'll see you there. As well as on the 30th, we're having our employee recognition to recognize employees in our community that have worked for us 5, 10, 15, so milestones, and also academic achievements of the schooling, etc. So we'll be doing that as well. Pardon? Yes, and then also on November 1st is the Chamber Awards Gala. I believe most of us are in attendance as well. The town of Stony Plain hands out 2 awards. One is for business and one's for the arts and culture. So it's a good evening that is well done by our chamber. So hopefully if you're there, we'll see you there. If not, you don't have tickets, I can probably scalp a few from you. Because I know a lady right there that can probably scalp a few for us if we need a few extra ones. And then also on the 3rd, is that the 3rd? Yes, that's the 3rd. I just want to thank Deputy Mayor Plesko for attending the Canadian Legion Musical Theatre tribute on my behalf. I've been there once, and I think members of the council have been there a couple of times as well, so I couldn't attend this year, but it is a good tribute to our fallen soldiers and the soldiers that have given their lives and the soldiers that have come back, so it's a very good moving tribute in terms of providing a little respect for servicemen and women, so thank you. Okay, with that ends council discussion. We'll move on to closed session and a closed meeting. And again, closed meeting, once we go into closed meeting, everybody that is not permitted in the room has to leave. We just keep records of whoever wants to come back in, and we'll call you back when we move out of in-camera session. And if you want to know what happened, nothing happens in closed sessions, only conversations and discussion. Anything that an official motion is made outside of closed session. Okay. Yeah, with that, if I can have a motion, please. Where am I now? Deputy Mayor. Okay, so we're going to go into closed session. All in favor? It's carried. And we'll take 5 minutes for everybody to clear out and then just Okay, so we're out of closed session. Administration, is anybody outside wanting to come back in? Did anybody leave their names?
No, Your Worship.
Okay, so we'll continue on with our meeting. We had a presentation, so going on 12.1. Councillor Mattis, please.
The town council accept the Regional Transit Service Committee October update report for information.
Okay, thank you very much for administration for your presentation and for the, I guess, what is he? Contractor? No. Consultant. Okay.
So could I just ask what happened between the report we had in our agenda package and this report? Because everything that I read and I was prepared on was not discussed, and this was the package we really needed. So where was the disconnect? And hopefully that's what happened.
Well, if you look at the package that was here, this was the old report that they provided to us from September 25th. This is the updated one that's been moving around that they did not email to us. So we would have read this already once when they did the presentation at the end of September. And then some things changed, as Councilor Laurie, that sits on the RTS, mentioned because of the percentage of riderships and et cetera, that changed. So therefore it changed the numbers and cents. And that's why this is dated October 28th and this one's dated September 25th.
Your Worship, apologies for the report. We have a timing issue that we'll work through. The EY is coming back in December for their last report, so we will ensure that council gets the up-to-date report in front of them, even if we have to email it to you like Friday afternoon or whatever. But it's basically a timing issue that we have to work through to get them here from Monday night. Apologize for that.
Yes, and even just a hard copy on Monday night is good as well, because we can read through that. Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's accepted for information, and that comes to adjournment. So thank you, administration, for the work on the presentations and the reports. And council, thanks for reading the questions and the comments. And I look forward to the next couple of days with you guys. Have fun. That's adjourned.